In Parashat Shavua, biblical chapter of Vayigash, we're going to learn the story of Joseph revealed himself to his brothers and help his brothers, his father and his entire family in a time of need. So many things we can learn from the biblical Joseph's righteous behavior. One of them is mitzvat tzedakah, the mitzvah of helping others in need. And tzedakah obviously start with family. But all the applications and implications of this mitzvah tzedakah we're going to discuss today. Pe'ah is a mitzvah to leave for the poor a corner of your field. Meaning, that mitzvah at that time applied for sure in the people who live in the Holy Land. And it meant that if you own a property and you're about to collect the harvest in your field, you should leave the corner in your field for the poor. The question that people raise, how much do I need to leave the corner? The answer, as we said before, this is one of which we call in the law world a gray area. We do not ask you. People do it according to their wishes and their good hearts. There's a famous story in the book of Ruth, at the end of Ruth, about Boaz, that he did not allow his employee to collect the harvests before the poor collected theirs, which means they left the whole corners, and early in the morning he let the poor people get in and collected all their needs, and only upon their leaving then he allowed his employees to collect the harvest. That's the great Boaz in the book of Ruth, that he merited to have his great-grandson King David. One of the reasons was because this is the character of righteous person. But basically there are no restrictions, there's no limitation of tzedakah, of pe'ah. Another example that the Mishnah mentioned at that time is the mitzvah of the first fruit, which called in Hebrew bikurim. The mitzvah of the first fruit is during the festival, particularly the festival of Shavuot, that is called Chag HaBikurim, the festival of the first fruit. We are commanded, those people who live in the Holy Land, and is upon the condition of the temple being existent, to collect the first fruit of our field and bring it to the temple. We have 613 commandments. People many times misconstrue the idea of commandments. They are thinking, we have so many. The truth of the matter, we do not have so many, because at least half of those commandments, it's still not applicable to our times at this moment. So, if we want to be very, speak in a general manner and generalize the commandments, we may say that we have close to 300 in a sense of somehow reality or fulfillment, if one wants to strive to fulfill all of them. But the entire 613, there are many commandments that either is not applicable to our times or is not applicable at all to us. Some example is this commandment of pe'ah, or bikurim. In order for you to fulfill it, or for me, we need to live in the Holy Land, we need to own the property in the Holy Land, and we need to have the temple in existence in order to fulfill those commandments. So basically, it's something to learn and to know, but it's not a commandment that we need to fulfill at this very moment. So the mitzvah of bikurim, of the first fruit, it's again, let's trace a story. Let's say if I own a orchard, or let's say apples or oranges or whatever it is, and now is the time to collect my income. I need to collect the best of the first fruits, bring it to the temple, and give to those people who serve in the temple, the Kohanim, the priests, the Levites, the people who serve in the temple in Jerusalem. The way that the Holy Land divided at that time was in a way that the 11 out of 12 tribes get a portion in the Holy Land. However, the tribe of Levi, which included the priests and the Levi, the Kohanim and Leviim, get part of Jerusalem in a sense of being served in Jerusalem and live in Jerusalem, but do not own a property in the Holy Land. That's part of them being holiness and holy people. So their income was only toward the generosity of people, the rest of the tribes that live in the land. And therefore, it was a commandment for people to give the first fruit. The question was, and still is, how much one should give. And the Mishnah tells us there is no limitation. You don't need to ask people for specifics. People give according to their generosity. For sure, there is a famous midrash, rabbinical teaching, that speak about Cain and Abel, the first crisis in the world, and they speak about that terrible killing of brother against brothers. And they ask first and foremost what happened to God, why God accepted Abel and did not accept Cain. And there's a famous Rashi and a famous midrash that's speaking about Cain being very greedy. He gave, quote unquote, God his sacrificial offering only from the leftover, while Abel gave the best of his fruits to God as an offering. And that's the famous midrashic, which is nice teaching. The idea that rabbis try to convey is, if you're giving something, give from the best and not give from the leftover, and don't embarrass those people who receive it. So with that in mind, we'll go now to Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. And again, short abbreviation for Phyllis' question last week. What is the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch? We answer in short that Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is abbreviation of Shulchan Aruch, of Code of Jewish Law, that was written in 1530, 1540, and with the interlineary commentary by the Rabbi Isolish of the 1550. Remember, we spent a lot of time last week explaining that, and 2 weeks ago, sorry. And in our times we try to have the abbreviation of the abbreviation of the abbreviation of the Code of Jewish Law, which is very wrong, but we have no choice because people like everything short and sweet and cut. So we give the abbreviation, and that's Kitzur. Kitzur meaning abbreviation of Code of Jewish Law. Chapter 34, the Law of Charity. It is a positive commandment to give charity to poor Jewish people. As it said, open your hand to him. And it said that your brother may live with you. Again, if you look at this quotation, it's indirect quotation. It's not speaking about how much and how to do it. It's just speaking about the importance of sharing with others. So anyone who sees a poor person seeking help and ignore him and does not give him charity transgresses a prohibitive commandment, as it said, not harden your heart, not shout your hand from your brother in need. Giving charity is a characteristic of the descendants of our forefather Abraham. As it said, for I have a special love for him, because he commands his children and his household after him to preserve the way of God, Hashem, doing charity and justice. Meaning, when you're speaking about Abraham is always represent to us kindness. From the text in the Torah to Kabbalah, it's always opening his tent to the poor people, even the 3 strangers that come to his house. And because of the character of Abraham and his loving kindness and loving charity, he is considering the first of the forefathers. And they said here that it's not just by him fulfilling the mitzvah of tzedakah, but teaching it to his children. As a side note, I have to say that I saw it in my previous congregation. We have an individual that was extremely charitable, but the minute he passed away, his 3 sons was just absolutely the opposite. So in a way, it's not enough to be a charitable person, but you need to teach your children and grandchildren to follow that path. And that's applied very much to Abraham. And the throne of Israel will be established, and the religion of truth confirmed only through charity. As it said, through charity will you be re-established. Again, this is not a text in the 5 books of Moses or Torah. This is a text of Isaiah. You know, Isaiah was the earlier prophets. You know, we have different era and time of prophets. Isaiah, it's about 200 years before the destruction of the first temple, and Jeremiah, it was much closer, it's close to 50 years. And then you have late prophets, but Isaiah is the early prophet, which is in a way a great prophet, maybe the great almost the great of that era, the great prophet of that era, because he have such a foreseen prognostications that it's 200 years before the destruction. One may say that Jeremiah is close to the end. He already foresee the destruction, and so it's a good prophecy, but it's uncomparable to Isaiah prophecy, which is much earlier. And he said, through charity will you be reestablished. So in a sense, he said here a very crucial and important sentence. He said, the same way that I'm prophesizing now, that it will be a destruction of the temple because of worshipping idols and all the transgressions that the Jewish people committed in the Holy Land. By the same token, I'm telling you, Isaiah said, that through charity will you be re-established. And here he's speaking like Zechariah, at the end of the book of Zechariah, that speaks about annulling the fast days and having those days as days of celebrations, and having the temple rebuilt and establishing the Jewish sovereignty over the Holy Land. So that's the redemption of the salvation of the Jews. It's written in the book of Isaiah through tzedakah, which translated loosely charity, will you be reestablished. Moreover, greater is he who performs acts of charity than one who brings all sacrifices. As it said, performing acts of charity and justice is more desirable to Hashem than sacrifices. That's from the book of Proverbs. So, who is saying it? We believe, according to the Talmud, that that's King Solomon in that book. But what did he say here? He said that, yes, I'm now the emissary to build a temple, and I'm about to build the first temple, and it's going to be a animal sacrificial offering. But don't think wrongly that sacrificial offering will satisfy the Lord and makes him happy. Basically, the sacrificial offering at that time, even according to the Maimonides, it's because of the other nations that live there, or by the other rabbis, that it was at that time the need of the people, the need of the culture. But even King Solomon at that time, as a builder of the first temple, he said here clearly and unequivocally, performing act of charity and justice is more desirable to God than sacrifices. If you go again to the prayer book, you see a famous sentence. We recite the phrases of the rituals of the sacrificial offering in the morning, and right after that we said, Master of the universe. That was the way that was in a temple. Today we don't have the temple, we don't have the priests acting and the Levites singing and doing all these actions in Jerusalem, but as a substitute we have our lips. So may it will be, Master of the universe, God, that our prayer and our word will be a substitute for those offerings. So basically, here they're speaking about charity and justice, that it's more important by this phrase. The Jewish people will be redeemed only through the merit of charity, tzedakah. As it said, Zion will be redeemed through justice, and its captive through act of charity. Again, from the book of Isaiah. He prophesied even the Jewish people live at that time in the Holy Land and have a beautiful life and great wealth. He predicted that they're going to be in exile and suffer there. But he said Zion will be redeemed through justice and its captives through act of charity. So in a way, he alluded to the idea that act of charity help in a theological matter to change God's decree. For those of you that wasn't here in the past, I want just to explain what I said, what is the theological matter. The concept of theology, it's basically in Latin, but also you find it in other philosophies, speaking about, and it's also in English language, they speak about man's ability to influence the supernatural power, which means that part of our faith, as well as many other religions, is the idea that one, by his or her prayer, can change a supernatural power or the omnipotent power of God decision over something that happened in the world. As an example, on Shabbat we said a prayer for the sick. So what actually we're doing? We're doing this ritual. We believe that by the fact that we have the quorum of people and we have the Torah open in this special time that divine providence is there, and hopefully show us in favor, who using that unique, exception moments to ask God to change decision over things in the world. So you mentioned the person's name, for example, in his mother's name, and you promised to give charity, etc. And you believe that that person who lives at the other side of the globe, right, will be healed. So actually what you're doing is, if you try to analyze it, it's you try to influence some forces above to change some situations in the world. This is following this text as an example. They said Zion will be redeemed through justice and its captive through act of charity, which means if you're acting in a sense of tzedakah, those people who are captive will be released. How it's worked, we explained that is in a theological belief, the ability that we'll be able toward our deeds to change a severe decree. That's, by the way, what we said in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We said teshuva, tefillah, tzedakah, repentance or return, prayer and charity can change severe decree, which means we believe that the power of our prayer and the power of giving charity will be, tzedakah, will be able to change a decree. So they said a person never becomes poor through giving charity. That's another myth or holy cow that I would like to break at this time, which means that there is some feeling that people feels like, it's a good example is Elimelech, again in the book of Ruth, that he was wealthy and he left the land of Israel to the enemies because he was disturbed that too many people knocked his door and asking for help, and he was afraid that he will lose whatever left over because he used to be a big giver, and he felt that like you hear it a lot of time, this is my money and that's my money, it belongs to me, and all of a sudden you're about to take it from me and I'm left with nothing. So a person never become poor through giving charity, nor will any evil or harm befall him because of his giving charity. As it said, is a quote again, through act of charity there will be peace. That's again from the book of Isaiah. Whoever is merciful with others will be treated with mercy from heaven, like measure for measure. As it said, and he, God, will show you mercy and have compassion upon you and multiply you. Right? That's from the Torah, from the book of Deuteronomy. So why God will do that for you? So it's try to say here in that message that it's a measure for measure. The same way that you are merciful to others and you go out of your way an extra mile to help other people, then God will be the same. But we have here several questions that I would like to present to you. First question is, if I receive today 10 different applications from 10 different institutions of people, that at least 5 of them I know well, and I have in my mind to give $100 charity today, how much do I need to give and how I split it? And or is that better that I should give one place that I know them very well, it's my relative, it's my friend, or it's an institution that I know well, or I should split it equally, or I should divide it in a way that I feel correctly? We don't have instruction yet. We will get to that. But basically they said here that God will show you mercy when you compassion upon and multiply you, which means that you not lose that money. My rabbi used to say always when he get a ticket, in that time for a few hundred shekel, like say for a few $100s, so he used to say, I didn't give a charity enough. So that's what happened. So I get it in different direction. So he was a righteous man and that was his feeling, but I have a lot of taken from that. The idea that sometimes we feel overwhelmed. I never gave over the phone, those people I don't know, but the mail or people who approach me, that's different, and we need to talk about it, and we will.
Rabbi. Oh, okay.
So anyone, I just want to finish this paragraph and then we'll go to that. Anyone who is cruel causes, that's a very strong sentence, causes his lineage to be suspect. That's very strong. Because they said on the bottom in the commentary, the descendants of Abraham are known for their kindness and generosity. One who does not possess this attitude causes his lineage to be doubtful. That's a very strong statement. It means that it is a famous, again, Midrashic saying that we are well known on our compassion and mercy, You call it in Yiddish Rahmanas, and we try to do it always right. But if someone is all of a sudden very strong with that and not open his heart and in his pocket for help, somehow that's his opinion. Again, you can take it or leave it in a way that the way presented, but it says it in a strong manner that it's not matching. In one hand, a person that is descendants of Abraham, and by the same token he's greedy. But I said here, the Holy One, blessed He, is near to the cry of the poor. As it said, He will hear the cry of the poor. Therefore one must beware of their anguish cry. For a covenant was made with them. And it said, when he cry out to me, and I will listen, for I am compassionate. They said about the poor person in book of Exodus that if you ignore him or her, and they come to God and they cry to Him, if they are orphan, widows, broken-hearted people, right? God will take it very seriously and judge those people strongly. The Jerusalem Talmud says the door that doesn't open for the poor will open for the doctor. Right? A person should consider that he continually requests his sustenance from the Holy One, blesses He, and just as he requests that the Holy One, blesses He, listen to his cry and prayer, so should he listen to the cry of the poor. A person should also consider that fortune is a wheel that revolves in the world. That's a Maimonides statement. The idea is that the world is always around, is not a square. And in a sense, one person is now at the top, and who knows what happened in the future.
As the world.
And at the end, he or she or their children or their grandchildren, right, might have to accept charity. Right? So let no man think, why should I diminish my wealth by giving it to the poor? For he should know, that's a strong statement, that the money is not his. That's against a lot of people believe. The money is not his, but rather it was given to him as a trust, with which to do the will of the one who entrusts the fund to him. And this, the tzedakah giving, will be his real share for his toils in this world, as a treatment, the act of charity shall proceed you, and that's the belief in continuation of life. Charity avoids evil decree and prolongs life. So, with that in mind, we need to discuss a few specifics. He is speaking here from many different directions. One moment he's negative, one moment he's positive. But he have a very strong words and strong quotations.
Before you go on to the other things besides giving charity in forms of money or gift, in Baltimore, several friends of mine work in a kosher kitchen where they stock the shelves with with kosher foods.
Right.
Have you heard of it?
Yes.
And people give food to that particular place for
Right.
people who are needy.
Right.
And I believe you said you have a discretionary fund.
Correct.
You don't have a kosher kitchen
Right.
thing.
In our shul we have two separate discretionary funds. We have one, and that's I believe in almost every shul. We have one fund that is called Rabbi Discretionary Fund that apply to the needs of synagogue per se, which means if we need a new prayer book, if we need a new books, if is other synagogues need that is not part of what the congregation approve as a yearly budget, and the spiritual leader feel at that time, either the rabbi or the cantor or whatever it is, that is a need, then that person can go ahead and use that fund for that purposes. There is another fund that is called the Pushke or the Tzedakah fund. That fund is solely for people who come, knock at our door, and ask for help. In our congregation, we have sometimes people in the congregation or outside people as well that come and ask. I ask them for driver license or some other proof, and we give them always something. Maybe not the way that they're expecting, because that fund is small, but we try to help. In the past, we helped people in crisis. I know that in my past 4 years here, I work extremely hard with that fund to do it in my very best. One of the things that I did, unlike my colleagues, is the first day I walk in, I put 2 people, the president and the vice president, at that fund, not because of trust issue, but because I want them to be aware of some cases and put together the people that they know and help. So, in a sense, I think we did a lot of goods. I feel in one side very privileged to have good people that chips in. On the other side, I have the sad feeling that there are several people in a great need, and it's not enough what we get in, either from the pushke or from other sources that people donated. It's not enough. And one day I want to deliver some sort of talk to explain to people not so much to give to Rabbi Discretionary Fund, because Rabbi Discretionary Fund go for different purposes, but to give to the charity fund, and that charity fund go to, for example, I have recently in here in Aleph Bet School 2 cases that we help people that couldn't pay the tuition. So what I try to say in our Hebrew school as well, this is a separate fund, but you are speaking about fund that dealing with food. There are several organizations, thank God, in every city. Kosher pantry, and some deal with the JCC, some independently. They go to a very poor people, especially people who have either large families or have a crisis in their house, and leave food at the door before Shabbat. There are several organizations in Washington, Baltimore as well that are doing that.
We don't have it here.
We don't have it here, unfortunately. We have Linda doing a lot of goods, but we don't have it here.
No,
maybe it's because we don't have, in a sense, we are blessed, but we don't have too many people that come to the door and say,
correct answer, because for the longest time,
years
the last
ago,
couple of years, we
I
sat
know
down
a
in committee.
right.
And
The question we didn't answer yet, it's how much should I give? We said before that the first fruit or the giving the corner in the Holy Land is no limit, but here is let's trace a situation. I made, let's say I'm a stockbroker, real estate, whatever, investor. And I made this week, let's say $5,000 profit. How much do I need to give charity, and to whom I need to give it? So I want to paraphrase number 4 in the next page in a very short way. And why it's working this way. First, we should know that is called tithe, maaser. There are different tzedakah in a sense of money that people are not even aware. So here I'm speaking about quote-unquote law. First idea is that when you have an income out of your labor or income out of good luck, as long as the income is kosher, which means it was not told deceiving or stealing money. No names. Right? As long as the money is fine and kosher, basically you are expected and required to give 10% of your income. However, it is not so simple. Here are some questions to show you the complications. If you take that concept seriously, first question is, let's say, what happens if I have a mortgage to pay? Is the mortgage considering part of my expense or not? How do I evaluate my income? If I said I have $5,000 profit this month, is that before my children's tuition or after? Is that before mortgage payment or after?
After.
Is that before paying taxes or after?
Before.
Is that before I pay insurance or after?
Before.
I often under that.
Okay, so some before, some after.
Of course.
Some is before, some after. And you should know that I'm not speaking of myself, I just try to paraphrase what they said here and other places. Basically, if that expense benefit the person, then it is not part of the expense. If it is not benefit the person, I'll go to the specific, then it's different. What do I mean by that? Mortgage, it's indirectly, at the end of the road, paying myself. Because even I take a mortgage for 30 years, or 15 years, or 10 years, or 20 years, and at the end of the road, part of that is the principal, part of that is the escrow, and one day I'll get my money back. Part, or all, or more, or show appreciation much more, but it will turn to the point that it will be back to my pocket. Therefore, paying mortgage is not considering an expense by Jewish law as far as giving charity. Children tuition, the same story. My great surprise when I read it first time, but that's what they said. Paying children tuition, it's part of the responsibility of the parents. And because of that, the rabbis have a big debate over children tuition. In short, there are some rabbis that feel that children tuition, especially for people who have low income, should be part of their tithe or giving charity, while others feels that that's a strong Jewish obligations and therefore it should be part of their expense.
How about if it's in the Jewish school as opposed to...
Right, I understand. So what I said is I try to present to you in a very objective way both sides.
Yeah.
There are some who feel that it should be part of the expense, there are some not. So regarding to children's tuition, I'll put myself back out and say that's a vague area. It's not 100% clear because it's a little debate between the rabbis. But it's clear to both sides that if it's not a low-income family, right, and if they have a nice size income for whatever it is, if it's inheritance or both sides working and make well-to-do, then children's education should not be part of their expense. If it's a low-income family and the situation that they even hardly can give any tzedakah, any charity, then there are some rabbis that feel that the tuition, children's education, should be part of their expense, or even part of their tithe. What does that mean, part of the tithe versus part of their expense? Part of their expense meaning that if I say that I made $5,000, it means I made $10,000, and $2,500 I pay mortgage, and $2,500 I pay tuitions, and now after reducing that, I said to you now I have net income of $5,000. That's one approach. There is another approach that said that no, before taxes. But there is another approach, and that's the correct one. If I made $10,000, calling it net, and if I reduce let's say the children's education to $2,500, then I made net $7,500, right? And if I reduce taxes, which is for sure part of the expense, so let's say it's a $5,000 to $6,000, whatever it is, that is called net income. Out of this net income, I'm obligated to give 10%. 10%, just to trace the case, it's $500. Next question we ask, so okay, here is the $500. What should I do with that? I have friends that they are in a great need. I know a family in the community that in a great need. I know somebody in Baltimore that needs. I know families in Israel that needs, and I have many organizations that approach me. So what should I do with these $500 and how I divided it?
And when? And when do you give it?
Right. Answer. First rule is your family and your people in the community take precedence before others. Which means if you have brothers, sisters, or immediate family in the need, they are the first. If you have very strong friends or people in the community that are in need, they are before others, and then you go in a cycle. So by Jewish law, the cycle goes from the closest cycles to the largest and largest and largest and largest. So even my case is a good example, and I have relatives as they are in Israel, So even they are, in a sense, they are in Israel, but because they are blood relatives, so basically I should try to help them. Now, the next situation is, okay, I approach this week and I get, let's say I have net $500 for charity, but I approach by 10 different organizations, and only 5 of them I know. First answer is, when you don't know, you don't need to give at all. That's for sure a clear answer. But what about the others, if I know all of them? The Halakha said, and that is the Maimonides, the Ramban, the great rabbi and philosopher and physician of the 12th century in Spain and Egypt and Israel. He wrote in a famous introduction to the Mishnah, he said that it should divide it equally, and you should not show partiality or favoritism to one organization, one person more than the others. And that is a surprising when I first time read it and learned it, but that's the halakha, that's the Jewish law. Which means that in that case, if I have 10 organizations that approach me, I should not give one organization 150 and another organization 300 and another organization 50, but I should divide it equally, $50 to each for 10 organizations.
To me, it does not make sense in one way.
I'm not saying that everything needs to make sense and everything needs to be logical.
I think the most important thing is the one who gets it.
How do you know how they need and what they
Well,
need?
that's
if you know it, it's different. But I'm speaking here about 5 or 10 organizations that you know that they exist and you know that they are legitimate, but you don't know, you didn't read the financial statement and you don't know exactly the situation.
I don't give the Red Cross anymore.
So you
I've
give
heard too many different stories.
You give
Other organization.
Okay, now there's another question you're asking here, and I can go for a long time with all these tough questions. What happened to all these executives and people who work for Magen David or other organizations, and in a sense they get such a high salary, and why should I give my $100 if I know that there's executives in New York that's making $200,000 or $300,000 over fundraising? Big debates between the rabbis.
And why should they?
One group of rabbis feel that because these people are excellent fundraisers for those organizations, and these are the people who bring the big money to the organizations, and this is part of their tools. So the same token that I'm hiring now a painter to paint my house, and we make a deal that in order for him to paint my house beautifully, that's the fee that he or she is going to get paid for that labor. So that's the fee these fundraisers get for their labors, and that's the contract they have with the organization. And in a way, it's none of my business. It's still considering a charity, it's a tzedakah. While others feel, well, if that's the case, I'll take my $100 and I should give it to directly to poor people that are really in a great need. I admire those people who can do that, but if you cannot do that, so what else you can do? But I personally always feel more comfortable to give directly to those people that I know they need. That's my always good feeling. So if I have, that's a personal statement, when I get income or other money that I want to distribute to other people, I always go first and foremost for those people in the community or those people I touch in a day-to-day basis, and those people I know well, that I know that they are in a great need, and that's the people I take precedence.
We were asking for money we need for R&D. I don't know if you were aware at that time or badly. There was more than one organization asking. One organization, the cost was a minimum, if I remember, administrative maintenance, like at least 20% more. Another one came out of Chicago. We knew them, what they were.
But that's again, it's a big debate subject. Before we're done, it's okay. We understand that it needs to be 10%, but if someone wants to give more than 10%, how much is the maximum? We again in Halakha, if it's not a field, we give you a maximum. If you read the number 4, they said the Hamebazbez, and one who will spend, and every year after the 5th of the profit, right? But you should not give away more than the 5th, so that you will not become dependent on the others. Which means, let's say, if I have I made a deal out, of, and I have net profit of $5,000, right? I'm not allowed to give more than $1,000, which means more than 20% of that income. That's a basic rule. For sure, if I'm a Bill Gates and I want to give 1/3, 2.1 billion, I don't know. Whatever it is, that's different. But a average person, the average income, right, it shouldn't exceed it more than 20%. Okay?
Very complicated.
Sure, it's not simple. What I would like to conclude is just to say as follows. We learned the idea of tzedakah. And tzedakah applied to many areas. It's not only money, and it's not necessarily money. The Rambam, the famous Nachmanides, brought 8 levels of charity. Everybody knows what I'm talking about? How many of you know the 8 levels? You know.
Oh yeah, I think I.
You know?
A little bit.
Okay, so in short, maybe another time we'll say it in the future.
Anonymous
8 levels. There are 8 levels of charity. Right? The lowest is if you know a person and he knows you, and both party or one of them gains some good out of that. The highest, you go higher, is one party doesn't know the others, and higher is both parties don't know the others. Right? And if you give it nicely, etc., etc.
Right.
And what is the highest? What is the highest of the highest? What is for the 8th level? What is the highest of the highest? What is the highest of the highest? If you know the person, and you know the person is a family person, and he or she needs a job, and you find them a job.
Hey, I like that.
And they will stand by their own feet.
Like the old
That's what the rabbis all agree, that that's the highest form of charity. Which means, if somebody come to you and he said to you, Cindy, I need a job, right? I have a problems in my house, etc., etc., etc. I lost my job, I need a job. And you make the phone call, right? And you talk with the person, and you put him in, and you have him stand by his own leg and help him to build himself up by himself by having his job. That's the highest of charity. It's like, by Torah law, it's like you're giving $1 million. So
I heard this
even
story.
that little phone call. Or another option of highest of the highest, if you help him or her to build their own business. Which means, let's say, if you have enough possibilities or enough capital, and you said, okay, what is your profession? And you said, okay, I am a graphic designer. Right? So you said, okay, I'm opening for you an office, right? And we will go partners, and the minutes you'll make enough income, you either give me back my $100,000 investment, or you know, we'll go yours, or we'll remain partners.
Then at what point do I say, I'd like to help you find a job instead of just giving you money? I felt guilty.
Good. Giving money, it's excellent point, but it's not considering the highest.
I felt like I was.
What was the answer then?
I didn't know what to do. It causes stress in a family.
Very simple. Basically, giving charity, if it's just giving an aspirin and not solving the problem, it's not considering the highest level of charity. It is a charity, but not the highest level. The highest level is if you'll be able to use your contact and friends to make the phone calls and inquiries.
But that wasn't what was accepted. That wasn't what they actually wanted.
You have to ask yourself.
That's why I asked you, they turn you down or what?
Yeah, I offered to do other things. Now we need to go beyond the money. We need to, let's talk about a budget, how you can work your money better. Let's talk about a job,
right.
You know, things like that.
For example,
he said, you have it, basically, not in these words, basically was, you have it to give, why won't you give it?
All right.
Oh.
Okay, that's not their business how much you have and what. But my point is this.
And that was only an assumption, too.
Okay, it's a very, very, very different.
So
the halakha look at that.
Guilt.
No, not guilt. But the halakha look at that as follows. First and foremost, you need to evaluate the situation. Mm-hmm. How you evaluate? I have a case, very similar case. What I do instead, I paid money to a professional to write for that person a resume, because he didn't have a nice resume. And after they wrote, right, and then I have a financial advisor that go after them, and that person collects their salary, and every time they need money, they come to that person. They didn't have a credit cards or other tools to go directly and buy anything they need. They need to go toward that person. And according to the way he presented later to me, several months later, he saved them so many thousands of dollars that they used to spend over all kind of crazy things. So that's the second thing, that they re-budget their lives. But as we said before, the highest level of charity is at the end of the road, if they will be able to either have their own job or open their own business or be partners in their own business, or you hire them for a job. That's the highest level of charity in a sense of money. If it's not sense of money, if you are for example, a medical doctor and give advice to a person that help that person, or you're helping if you're in the field of education, you're teaching people and share with them your knowledge, that's another important form of charity. So what we learned today is the idea of tzedakah. Tzedakah comes from the justice, and it's a charity, and there are many different avenues, and there is a lot to learn about it. And I encourage you not just to read here this chapter, and please come back to me with questions, but to read more about it, and there are many books out there to speak about it. And I want to conclude with the story with my father. My father, God bless his heart, he built a big Jewish school and mikveh and shul in one of the big neighborhoods in Haifa in Israel. And he struggled for 22 years to build a mikveh, to build a place that women used to go, etc., etc. So why it took him 22 years? When I was a teenager, a guy came to him. He immigrated from Germany to Israel, and he sold his business. And he came to my dad and he said he wants to donate a big amount of money for his business. He was a single person, elderly person, who wants to donate that money, for a big part of that money for the mikveh. You have to know my father. My father, the first question he asked him, tell me about your business and how you make your money. Sitting there, I was a little boy, and I heard a conversation. I was shocked. He said to my dad, well, I have a casino business. And he goes through details, and he told my father all of that. My father said, I'm not going to take any money from you. And the guy running after my father, then he came back and he sold all the bathrooms in the mikvahs, you take. My father refused. So finally he go to somebody else in different neighborhood and he donated. But I remember vividly that my father refused to take, and we came to my father and says, we need it so badly. So my father said, you can't contradict yourself. You're building a institution for purity of a family, and you build it for the public, for the community, and you're accepting charity that is dirty money. It's not
gain. Never accept.